Hi, this is Attorney Walter Hnot, and what we're going to be going through today is a rather large topic, which is answering where do the Republican candidates for the 2024 presidential election actually stand on the topic of Social Security benefits. And one of the big things that we have to go through is essentially how politicians have changed the future of Social Security benefits by what happened with the transition with Commissioner Saul to Commissioner Kijakazi. There's a lot of things that we have to understand and a lot of things that we have to consider going forward when it comes to picking a candidate and the result of what commissioner we have. I want to go through essentially where each candidate stands on the Republican side as they just had their debate. And I want to go through and help you understand the macro issue that we're facing with an underlying time and money problem for retirement and Medicare benefits. Let's go through some of the basics here. We'll be addressing retirement. We'll be addressing Social Security disability insurance. We'll be addressing supplemental security income and many of the other programs that are under the Social Security Administration, which is currently with Acting Commissioner Kijakazi. There is a tapped individual by President Biden to go ahead and take over the role, not as acting, but as full commissioner, Mr. O'Malley, which I think will be an interesting change. Let's go into some of the basic details right now. Donald Trump, of course, is a unique situation. Obviously, going in with a Georgia problem. Tomorrow will be Thursday, which we will very likely actually see a mugshot of Donald Trump as a result from that. But you cannot deny the fact that he is very likely to be one of the frontrunners, if not the frontrunner, for the Republican Party. Now, we know a lot about Donald Trump and Social Security benefits. We know where he stands, what he likes, what he wants, what he doesn't want, and who he puts in control of the Social Security Administration. So, for example, the Social Security Administration under President Trump had Commissioner Saul. Commissioner Saul did a lot of changes behind the scene. Now, while President Trump stated that you shouldn't touch, it's out of bounds, it's not something we should look at right now for Social Security benefits, the reality is the commissioner that was put in place by Donald Trump essentially was a very anti-disability individual when it comes to changing the rules for people to be found disability. You have to weigh and balance the effects that were occurring with too many people appealing that didn't really have appealable claims versus essentially the situation of, let's call it like it is, them having to tighten the purse strings on Social Security disability benefits. What happened ultimately was that some of the evidence rules for weight of evidence were changed, which made it much more difficult to appeal into the higher levels like appeals council, federal district court, circuit court, Supreme Court. And as the result of that, we did not see, and as attorneys that practice in this field, opportunities to try and win claims with remands back to the original ALJ. So while President Trump stood very strong with the idea that he didn't want to touch Social Security benefits, he didn't want to modify them, etc., the actual actions of him as the president during that time were to go ahead and put in a commissioner who was very aggressive at reducing the amount of appeals, changing weight of evidence, changing listings, and overall, closing the doors to who could be found disabled. With that said, even into President Biden's current administration, the CDI units have continued to grow, and they were required to grow by Congress as per their funding into every single state. As you know, CDI units are the continuing disability investigative units that go ahead and essentially follow people around that they think are committing fraud. And there are many levels of investigators that take place at the SSA, which is going to be a very interesting future topic for Social Security benefits, especially during 2024. What you have to keep in mind is that there are many levels of investigation that occur within the SSA for individuals. Some of them are short form CDRs. That's where they're going to go ahead and send you out a quick form, give us a quick update, and we'll review it. And then there's a long form CDR. These are things used to see if you are still disabled. Long form CDR means that they're really looking into it more. Then you get into investigations where OIG, the Office of Inspector General, will have an analyst go ahead and review the documentation that they have on file to see if everything is correct. Then you get to CDI units where they hire an individual to go ahead and follow you around most of the time. They'll pull your police records, they'll pull other records, go ahead and see if there's any potential fraud that can be used against you going forward. What you have to understand is that this topic is not addressed pretty much by every president that we have. It's a topic that people do not like to talk about in politics, because if they were to talk about it in politics, to be fair, right? It would be a very negative thing. It would be something where they would lose potential votes because they talked about a group that follows people around who are receiving disability benefits. The government always states and is backed by the idea that they're only doing this if there's the potential of frauding the Social Security Administration system, in which there is quite a lot of fraud. Almost every week, there's some massive story about either an SSA person or a claimant receiving benefits that is committing fraud. Okay. So, one of the things we know right off the bat is that we probably will never hear these presidential candidates go ahead and talk about the OIG, CDI units. However, when it comes to essentially what we know from President Trump, we know that he took a very strong stance for reducing the likelihood of people being found disabled and reducing basically the capacity to be appealed and increasing the likelihood of CDRs to occur. CDRs are continuing disability reviews. And as many of you know, CDRs essentially are mostly computerized, where they do that review with a short form or a long form to see if you're still severely impaired and therefore able to stay on disability benefits. With that said, President Trump tried to put in a 2-year provision, which the Democrats threw a very big, I don't know how, a very upset party about it. And the reality is that one of Biden's main things as he was promoting going against Trump when it comes to Social Security benefits was that he was going to get rid of the 2-year provision, which he did. But the problem is they still reserve the right to go ahead and review you under a 1-year provision, 3-year provision, 7-year provision, etc. So getting rid of the 2-year provision didn't really do anything in a practical application standpoint when it comes to will they go ahead and review you more or less often as a result of it. It didn't really make a big change. Honestly, it didn't make any change. That's the reality of it. If they wanted to go ahead and review you 1 year and then the next year and then the next year and the next year, they have it within their capacity and rulings to be able to do that. Now, with that said, I hope you guys enjoy this channel. Please remember to like, please remember to subscribe, and please remember to go ahead and leave a review if you enjoy the channel by going to Google and searching Disability Resolution Law Firm or Disability Resolution Florida. There is a big issue out there where many other channels are copying the information and the scripts that I create and give to you. And the problem I have with it is that I have a $500,000 student loan bill, which is down to around $300,000. They have none of that. Many of these other channels that are out there do not have any student loans. Many of these other channels that are out there do not actually practice disability law. They are sometimes just disabled people who are trying to make some videos, or sometimes they're even other attorneys that are copying and pasting my information into their videos. Sometimes they're just somebody who basically puts my voice into a machine, changes my voice to a different voice, and then basically reposts the audio. So if you would like me to continue to succeed, it is imperative that you remember to thumbs up, like, and subscribe to these videos and hit the bell, because unfortunately the algorithm is having a low with this channel right now. And I don't know if it's because somebody is reporting videos, but every time before I start, these videos get downvoted before anybody even upvotes. So I do have some hostility in the environment among other people who are competing against me, which is sad, but it is what it is when you are the most viewed and subscribed to disability attorney in America. Now, with that said, Donald Trump, as you know, is going through some legal issues. I have always found that he, and they call him Teflon Don, is able to usually get out of most situations. However, he recently had an individual that was part of the legal, claim go ahead and flip. And so one of the issues that he might run into is that he might not have all of his players on board when it comes to testimony presented in an actual hearing situation. And then, of course, one of the problems that will usually happen is that as the court continues, as testimony flips, you get even more charges and things like that. I don't think anybody would disagree that he is facing unreasonable charges in many of the situations that are, coming against him. I don't think anybody would disagree that the swamp we know as the federal government and the state government have a lot of bad characters in it that are trying to reduce the likelihood of him being, becoming their boss, the president of the United States in the future. I think it's obvious at this point that we have a 2-tier legal system. I think it's obvious at this point that we have a retribution-based, revenge-based, legal system. And the unfortunate thing about that is that I've never seen so many egregious acts done by judges. I've never seen so many egregious acts done by politicians in a political sense against other politicians And I do not believe that these egregious acts, this aggressiveness towards him, will continue against President Biden if he is not voted in for another term. And I'm not going to go into much further detail with that, but they do have more evidence on him than they did on Nixon. One thing that I think is very sad, and I want to point this out because I think it's incredibly important to understand. When Bill Clinton had his issue with the Oval Office, the Social Security changes that we all needed were taken off the table because they went after him. The same thing is occurring with President Biden, which means that even if President Biden makes promises for 2024 and changes for Social Security benefits, the ultimate issue is that he is almost with absolute certainty not going to pass them because they're going to be going at him through his son, Hunter. And as a result of that, the problem as it exists, unfortunately, is that he will not have the American people's best interest at heart because he will be defending a personal matter at a very high level. Let's go to the next individual on this, specifically Ron DeSantis. I'm going to read to you directly from a NASDAQ.com article, which was the GOP president debate. How can these 8 Republican nominees impact the future of Social Security benefits? Let's see what they had to say. Ron DeSantis, as recently as March, DeSantis told Fox News that Republicans are not going to mess with Social Security. CNBC reported, but the Florida governor might be shifting his position. As the WAPO reported over the weekend, Washington Post, DeSantis told Fox News that Social Security will need to be revamped by cutting benefits for future generations. When people say they were going to somehow cut seniors, that is totally not true, DeSantis said, talking about making changes for people in their 30s and their 40s so the program's viable. That's a much different thing and something I think there's going to need to be discussion on. Now, I'm going to be very honest with you. Cutting retirement benefits for those in their 30s and 40s would be the end of America. America was built on a basic preliminary idea, and that was that if you work hard, you will be rewarded, right? It's the carrot versus the stick doctrine, but the carrot in this case was always simple. If you work hard, you will pay into the system, and the system will have retirement benefits waiting for you on a monthly basis with Medicare as an option when you reach a certain age. As an obvious outcome, the failure of politicians to consistently uphold the promise that they made in the 1930s, Social Security retirement, 1950s, Social Security disability insurance, 1970s, supplemental security income. The mere fact that our retirement keeps getting pushed farther down the line as to how long we live is completely unacceptable. Just to claim that people live longer is an absolutely worthless argument against the fact that the country that makes the most money on earth is not able to reduce the initial retirement age, the full retirement age, and the maximum retirement age, being right now 62, 67, and 70. Those should be being reduced to 60, 65, and 67. But you're not seeing that because every politician, every Democrat, every Republican, every independent has failed the American people on the promise made in the 1930s, 50s, and 70s. Now, we are seeing a falter again. Ron DeSantis talking about those in their 30s and 40s not having the same promise, being that the benefits for retirement are not going to be available in the same manner and form. Well, here's the thing. They're going to run into an argument problem. The argument is, hey, can we reduce benefits for those in their 30s and 40s and still get elected? That's the literal legal thesis question. Can we, that's what Ron DeSantis is asking himself, reduce benefits for those in their 30s and 40s so that they won't be able to afford living on retirement alone? And let's be honest, that's the practical application output of what this is going on about. We are looking at those in their 30s and 40s not having a retirement program because it's not a retirement program anymore if it can't uphold you through retirement. But here's the problem. Some people make the very erroneous argument that retirement benefits were never meant to uphold a person through their retired years. That is incorrect. 100% incorrect. And here's why. If retirement benefits were not meant to uphold a person Number one, then why are they similar in amount to Social Security disability insurance benefits, which we expect the person to live on for the rest of their life until they reach their retirement benefits and convert over to full retirement? So, if a person was not expected to live on their retirement benefits for the rest of their life, then why do we expect their counterpart, a Social Security disability insurance recipient, to live on the near and sometimes exact same amount? Additionally, as a result of the program being something where future generations pay for past generations, you have to then question, if past generations received a retirement check and they were using that to be able to live off of it, and some of those individuals were basically women who were married to a man, the man worked, the female did not, then why is that check to the female not expected to be enough to upkeep her through the rest of her retirement when she accesses the title to retirement benefits of her husband when he becomes deceased? Obviously, the expectation is that the female who didn't work throughout her life as somebody who worked at home, and that's something that, because of a failed country and a failed economy, we no longer have. Women no longer have the choice to have children and care for the children in the home. They're now expected to not only have the children, care for the children, but also have a job to pay for their existence. That is also a failed aspect of our political parties, both Republican and Democrat, where they have reduced our standard of living, where it always requires every adult to work. So now we go back to the original 1930s style of living. Many females, many women were going ahead and not working, but taking care of the children. As a result of this, they were expected to live off of the retirement provided by retirement. So the ideology that retirement benefits were not intended as the main total source is incorrect. It was intended, when put in place, to be the foundation that people needed to be able to live to make it year by year. Sure, it wasn't meant to be the maximum amount to go ahead and have large investments, buy nicer things, etc. But it was the foundational check every month that a person required in order to be able to live forward, whether they earned it or their spouse earned it. Ron DeSantis presenting the argument, which is what many of the Republicans are jumping on board with, that essentially a person should only go ahead and look to the future for a reduced retirement benefit, is completely unacceptable. The Republicans are likely going to lose significant votes over this argument. And here is why. Those in their 30s and 40s have debt that is greater than any other group that exists. This is because the dollar has significantly devalued. Their student loans are extremely high because they are shark loans. And at the end of the day, to live, it costs significantly more, which means their credit cards are loaded. As a result of this, they very easily get caught in a repeating monthly scam between credit cards, student loans, and rent. The ultimate problem of this is that when you tell them they're going to have a reduced retirement and they're going to pay the same amount but not get as much, they will, I guarantee you, find a way to stop funding retirement benefits. And that's a problem because those people who are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and even 90s, and those in their hundreds are unfortunately relying on the people who are 30s and 40s paying for their retirement check. That is a very large issue to consider. So we see Ron DeSantis originally going with the camp ideology of President Trump, but is now switching his expectations to basically what many of these other Republican candidates are proposing. Okay. All right. Let's talk about Mike Pence, prior vice president, I would consider Mike Pence to be a true Republican. Okay. He is an individual who follows many of the things that you would expect from a traditional Republican, even though he was labeled a rhino. He is obviously promoting the ideology that he is anything but Trump. Let's go through from specifically NASDAQ.com what they had to say about where he stands on Social Security benefits. As previously reported by Go Banking Rates, the former vice president has proposed privatizing Social Security by giving younger Americans the ability to take a portion of their Social Security withholdings and put that into a private savings account. This is not a new idea, but it remains an unpopular one because it is essentially amounts to gutting the current Social Security system in favor of a market-driven program. The market-driven program, whether private, meaning that people are allowed to invest the money, or public, meaning the government invests their money into stocks, invest their money into bonds other than the specialized bonds that we currently use, is not a popular idea merely because our country, the United States of America's special Social Security bonds, are essentially underperforming. If they were performing well, we wouldn't need to talk about a market-driven program. But they're performing very poorly, which is why we don't have enough money in the trust funds. Thank you, Pi, for the $5 donation. I super appreciate it. That's awesome. Very cool. Very cool. So with that said, what you have to consider is that there's a problem here. And the problem is basically that we do need to utilize some sort of market-driven program for the money that's paid in to increase the ROI, the return on investment for the money paid from our FICA taxes. The simplified version of our FICA taxes is that 12.4% of money that we earn up to $160,200 is basically taxed. That money goes into mostly special bonds, which is then converted and paid out to those who receive their retirement benefits, disability benefits, their Medicare, etc. Okay. The issue is that they are afraid to allow for this change in market-driven program, because if you start to take money and repurpose it into a different sort of investment, they are concerned that that money very likely will go ahead and not be as available, short-term, long-term, etc. restrictions, for them to pay the current recipients. So the current recipients, once they learn more about this program, how they would invest it into other investment options, how much they'd be able to take out of it to be able to have their regular retirement check. Once they find out that there's some issues there, those who are older currently receiving, who are not backing the youth. I'm very amazed by this. Those who are older, those in their 60s, 70s, 80s, there's something mentally wrong with a certain group of individuals having a difficult time understanding that the student loans are so bad. They're like the credit cards of loans that these kids in their 30s, their 40s, I mean, I'm one of them. I'm old enough where I literally have not only the traditional government loans that everybody talks about, but I have the private loans before that just to be able to go to school. So before the government took it over, some people have a hard time understanding the basics that these student loans restrict people from earning and investing more into their life. That means buying products that they can use to push forward ideas that they have, innovating future products to make entire areas, just like Silicon Valley, just like all these other amazing things where you see a group of people innovating future products that other countries are just jumping at to try and get. We don't have that now. We don't have that now. We don't have Silicon Valley now like we used to. We just don't have it now. And that is because the future generations have a very heavy burden on their shoulders and financially can't get out from under it. Remember, my student loans are around $1,800 a month. Remember that. All right, Nikki Haley, where does she stand with this? Nikki Haley, the former South Carolina governor and UN ambassador. And remember, when they make somebody UN ambassador to London, stuff like that, they intend to promote them into a presidential position at some point. has proposed raising the Social Security retirement age for workers currently in their 20s and limiting Social Security and Medicare benefits for the wealthy. Raising the full retirement age, currently 67 years old for most Americans, also amounts to a cut in benefits because it delays when eligible beneficiaries qualify for the full payments they are owed. Here's a quote. What you would do is, for those in their 20s coming to the system, we would change the retirement age so that it would match life expectancy. Okay, so let's talk about this real quick. Here is the main problem with raising the retirement age. We have, as human beings, a limited time on this earth, right? We only live from here to here. And you could make it a very large. Most people live from 60 years old to basically 105 years old, right? Somewhere in there is a good mixture. But then there's a problem. You have significant amounts of people who are in a car accident. They never get to access their retirement benefits. They never even get to access their disability benefits because they pass away. All those people in those Maui fires that passed away, many of them also were paying into the system. Some of them never even got a chance to access the retirement benefits. So the problem is they're playing a game here. And the game is you make people wait longer for their retirement benefits. Think about that. What does that do? It makes it so that people have to pay in more over their lifetime. It makes it so that people are less likely to have beneficial golden years at the end of their life. They have fewer years where they're retired, so they can't enjoy life as much. The expectation is that if they're going to live longer, then basically they're going to reduce the amount of money they have to give to that person because the amount of time that they're allowed to be free from working a day-to-day job should stay the same. I cannot think of a form of American slavery that is more horrific in today's modern era than what we have in the form of Social Security benefits. Because the study of human life and the study of what is left for them to live and reducing that by saying they live longer, but still keeping it similar in time, does not mean that the American economy or its general people are going to succeed forward with a better living. It should be understood that America is in a very tough spot. Our reserve currency is being purchased less and less and less. Africa as a continent has a significant portion, over 50% of its nations, siding with Russia. There are, unfortunately, lines being drawn in the sand. And the worst part is that America has not prepared its citizens for a future where they are capable of supporting themselves from something they have already paid into. This idea tries to circumvent that by saying that if they're only 20, they haven't really paid into the system yet. Therefore, we don't really have a contract with them. Look, the people who've been paying in their whole life, right? Those people, we got to help them out. The 30s, they've already got a decade or so into it. The 40s, they got 2 decades into it. We can't really screw them over. But the people in their 20s, we could do that. And that's what this is. Nikki Haley is presenting a violation of contract law where the person could go ahead and pay in and get similar treatment. The government would argue that the rules have changed as a result of people living longer. I would argue that they should have always taken enough time to make sure the trust funds were completely funded. That was the goal of President Bill Clinton. It was completely taken off the table when they filed for impeachment. What do you think is going to happen with President Biden? Chris Christie, the former New Jersey governor, made a lot of noise over the weekend when he said Social Security will be bankrupt in 11 years, which is not totally accurate because they're looking at more realistically 9 to 10 years, and accused some of his fellow candidates of being liars and cowards for not tackling Social Security's funding problems head on. Christie has proposed raising the Social Security benefits age for Americans currently We can make real savings over the long term by playing with eligibility age, he said. We've got to have this conversation. And other than me, nobody in this race is willing to talk about it. It's ridiculous. Chris Christie is right. He is a bull in a china shop, right? He is an aggressive pusher. He is in your face. But he's also realizing that the largest percent of people who can change an election, it's not Christians. Nope, it's not any other group. It's these Social Security recipients. These are people who receive a check. These are people who vote. And what you need to understand, and not to mention they're used to interacting with the government, but what you need to understand is this. He is trying to use what President Biden will be using in 2024, which is the everybody is weak and I am strong doctrine. We must talk about it and find a solution doctrine. The idea that basically he is the only answer, the Messiah doctrine. What I want to point out with this, and I think it's incredibly important, is that unfortunately, there is a major problem with Medicare and retirement benefits. The trust funds aren't doing well. Medicare has the advantage because people pay for that once they're older and continue to pay for it. A lot of people don't realize that they pay for Medicare through their FICA taxes, and then they continue to pay for it through their retirement. Is that a good program? Sounds pretty unfair to me. But it is what it is. People seem to accept the worst option because they don't care. They don't research it. Retirement benefits, you do not continue to pay for once you become retired. The idea is that you've paid in your whole life and therefore you get your check. The problem with retirement benefits is that in about 10 years, around 20% to 23% will go ahead and be reduced off of every check received. That means people will be getting somewhere around 79 to 80% of the check they're supposed to based off the most current metrics that have been received and posted by the Social Security Administration. That's not good because a benefit that barely keeps people above the waterline is now going to be reduced by 20% plus, which means that you will have mass poverty, which means that over the next 10 years, you're going to see basically the preparation of people downsizing significantly so that they can go ahead and prepare for this. I have heard from politicians personally. I have heard from nonprofit owners personally. Well, they're leaders anyway, the ones that lead them, because, nonprofits, who owns them? That's always a tricky little thing. I have heard from people who are specifically from the Social Security Administration on what their thoughts are on the fixing of retirement benefits. Everyone has assured me that the politicians will fix it. I have zero assurances for any of you that the politicians will fix it. The mere fact that Chris Christie, the bull of the Republican Party, the aggressor of the Republican Party, has to play the card that only he has the capacity, the chutzpah, to go ahead and talk about it. That should tell you all you need to know. Because if nobody else is willing to engage on the problem, then realistically, we cannot rely on Chris Christie to go ahead and sell this. There are some things that you need to keep in mind as well. Chris Christie is likely not going to be voted in. And it's a sad thing, and it's a testament to the problem that we have with disability benefits and how people view disabled individuals. When people vote for individuals, especially for the role of president, they traditionally do not vote for people who are overweight. And they do this because TV feeds us information about the perfect body, the perfect human. Look up to this being. He, as a result of his weight, does not fit what America is likely to vote for. Does not fit both the Democrat policy or Republican policy on what we traditionally vote for presidential candidates. This is not a good thing because in the future, we hope to see diversity in options of voting, weight included. We hope to see neat ideas, different ideas, new bills, changes in direction, pivots, if you will, towards something better. But unfortunately, I do not think he is currently electable as a result of his weight. I think if it was for Senate, there's a possibility. House, absolute possibility. But bottom line is, America does not vote for individuals that are usually heavier in the modern arena. Okay. Next one, Tim Scott. The South Carolina senator says he would not touch Social Security or Medicare benefits. The Washington Post reported, however, Scott says the U.S. should examine the state of entitlements to tame the tiger. What a lot of Republicans focus on when they do their rally cry at these events is talking about the fraud that occurs with Social Security benefits. One of the main flavors of essentially showing that there's fraud is showing basically people who are, significantly overweight, people who are working other jobs while still collecting a check, people who are using the money to buy drugs, people who are using the federal money to buy alcohol, people who are using the federal money to buy cigarettes. As a result of this, the problem is, and let's just be very honest about it, that we are taking, as the Republican side versus the Democrat side, a very aggressive approach towards trying to show, basically, and this is more of a Republican thing, that the disabled, a large portion of them, are fraudulent, that they shouldn't be receiving benefits, etc. What does not help is that some long-term recipients were found disabled during a time where it was very easy to be found disabled. If you go back to 2000, if you go back to 1995, if you go back to 1990, it was significantly easier to be found disabled. I've read many decisions from that time period, and I can guarantee you not a single one of them that I have read that people brought to me to go ahead and say, would I have been found disabled? What does this mean? How does this work? Nowadays, I have not found a single one that under the new rules and regulations would have gone through. Now, with that said, people approach me with their old decisions to find out essentially where they stand, what happened. Those who are truly significantly impaired back in the day don't ever have that question. So you have to understand there's, that reasoning behind why people approach me with that decision. And you have to understand the reason why they approach me with that is because they're wondering if a CDR is likely to occur, in which case they would lose their benefits. Do I think that people on disability benefits after a certain period of time should be granted some sort of permanency until they reach retirement benefits as an option? I'm open to it. When somebody's been on disability benefits for 20 years, how are you going to send that person back to work? What training programs exist to get that person back to work? If they're not currently as severe as they were, and they've significantly improved after 20 years of being on the program, are they capable and ready of going and working? You can retrain individuals. And you know what the sad thing is? One thing that America rarely talks about is that a significant percentage of individuals are not capable of working many of the jobs that exist. They don't have the diction, syntax, the basic, knowledge base of words, functioning sentences. They don't have those things. They can't do many jobs in the national economy as a result of a lack of basic education. And as a result of it, one of the first things that people learn in my field, or in the field of social workers, or in the field of those who work with the homeless, is that not everybody is meant to go to college, and not even everybody is meant to go to high school, even though we, of course, shoot for a high school diploma being the base foundation. The reason why is we're all different. We're all genetically different. We all have different capacities for learning and following the system. And not everybody's genetic makeup is a great match for the system and marketplace and capitalism that we use in this country. As a result of that, there is a problem. And the problem is that we have not found a way to better train and instruct people to go and do work options. So when you have people constantly getting work and then getting fired, and then there's no program in place to help them with those deficits to be able to retain jobs longer, then you know that the system is purposely set up to fail, because there's no rotation on how to deal with a fail that should be turned into a win. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name because I've heard it multiple times from different news stations. They pronounce it differently with different groups. With Vivek Ramaswamy, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I've heard it multiple times from different groups. Co-founder and executive chairman of Strive Asset Management, super ultra rich, has said that proposals to reform Social Security come from a good place, which is political speak for he's about to bullshit us. According to Washington Post, he also believes the government should honor its commitment to those who paid into the system, which is him doing the DC two-step before he's really in the DC area, where he's saying, I understand this argument, I understand that argument, but I'm not really going to give comment either way because no good answer exists that I've figured out. He quotes as, if the government has made you certain commitments that you have lived your life and paid in as, if the government has made you certain commitments that you have lived your life and paid in as you have over the last number of years in your life, which is a really poor way to, he should have shortened that one, that you can't just pull that rug out from under them. First of all, it should have been rephrased to just say, the government has a contract with you and they cannot go back on that contract. And the bottom line is that's true, but he has not given us any direct indication of where he's realistically going with Social Security reform, which is going to be a very important topic, if not the most important topic for 2024. I see this person as a young, hopeful, wealthy competitor. I see this person as somebody who knows what people want. I do not believe some of the things that he says. I do not trust some of the ways that he presents his arguments. And I'm going to be very honest with you. I like things about him. I don't like things about him. But I do know this. He's a little too good at playing the political game and the political role. He is an interesting individual. I've seen him get batted back and forth on the left side. I've seen him get challenged on the right side. Whether or not he has sticking power against these true heavyweights that have been in this for a long time, we'll know within the next 5 months, because that's all he's going to get to be able to stay in the game. Doug Burgum, the North Dakota governor, I don't know much about him, signed the legislation that ends taxing Social Security income. As you know, another state has recently stopped taxing Social Security income. States that the U.S. government should honor its commitment on Social Security. The safe zone for a lot of these politicians is to present the argument that Social Security should honor what it's supposed to do and that they'll find the money somewhere. The Democrats proffer, which is a good selling point, that if they raise the FICA tax to people earning over $160,200, then that should keep the program rolling. But if somebody makes $500,000 or if somebody makes $5 million, then over $500,000 of that earned income will be taxed, which the rich are never going to want to do. So in order for the Democrats to actually get done what they're promising, what they're pushing, they're going to have to anger those same people who make significant amounts of money and then also make political donations, which I don't think is at all ever going to have a shot of actually passing. Asa Hutchinson, according to the Washington Post, the former Arkansas governor opposes changes to Social Security, such as raising the retirement age for all workers. One reason is that such a move would hurt some workers more than others. We have got to protect Social Security and Medicare, Hutchinson said. When you look at the long-term concerns about it, we have got to bring in more workers. Now, this individual brings up an interesting point. America, unlike other countries such as China, does not have a system based off of the type of work you used to do. Now, we do have caveat provisions for Social Security disability benefits. Like if you've worked as a blue-collar worker doing the heavy work for more than 35 years, you can automatically get that finding of disability benefits because you're going to be disabled with 35 years of hard labor. But for retirement, we do not have an earlier year that a blue-collar worker would be able to retire at than a white-collar worker. The way I always look at it as you have basically orange collar, blue collar, white collar. Orange collar is, landscaping, tree cutting. Blue collar is, electrician, welder, mechanic shop. And the white collar is your accounting, attorneys, administration at some business, etc. What's interesting about this is that we have not found a way to properly balance the workload experienced by a person and the expectation of when they should be able to retire. So if you have somebody with an orange shirt, right, an orange collar, going ahead and doing weed whacking and mowing for their entire life, a couple basic things are almost certain. They're going to get cancer because they've been in the sun a lot. They usually have respiratory issues from all the pollen and things that they cut while they were doing landscaping. They usually have physical trauma to their body as a result of a machine injuring them or a large, it could be anything from a tree to a bush, whatever, falling on them. And as a result of all these things, those individuals having to do heavy physical labor, they've got worn out knees, they've got worn out backs, etc. We don't allow them to retire earlier because everybody retires at the same time based off of their age, whether they're male or female. It's not like that in every country. Other countries, if you're a male, you retire at one time. If you're a blue collar versus white collar male, you retire at a different time. If you're a female, you retire at a different time. If you're a female with white collar or a blue collar, you retire at a different time. So the point is, that's another option to look at as to when people should be able to retire. Now, this is going to be unpopular because those who are white collar individuals do not want to retire later down the line. They don't want to have to pay for the blue collar individuals. So unpopular, but it does bring up an interesting point, specifically with this individual, as to essentially what is fair to make it work. And remember, Social Security benefits, you will say that they are not a social-oriented program, but they are Social Security benefits. The whole point of them is that we pay them as a social net to make sure that society continues to turn. Because let's call it like it is. You're not going to have an office that people can work in if you don't have electrical, if you don't have sheetrock people, if you don't have concrete people, if you don't have plumbing people, if you don't have, all the classics that are needed to go ahead and make an office building work. Not to mention those who have to do the grading of it, lay the concrete pad, all that stuff. So the point I'm getting at here is Social Security is going to have to change. But whether or not we make it something that actually works as a social program the way it's supposed to, so that it's fair for people, well, I don't know. Let's take, for example, that one idea of having blue collars retire sooner than white collar individuals. The blue collar individuals, right, just to be fair, some of them are white collar individuals. So if you have a landscaper that owns a landscaping company and hasn't been landscaping for the past 20 years because his employee is doing all that, would you consider that person a blue collar or a white collar individual? And how would you classify that? If all of those who own the business are not considered and they're white collar workers, then what about those who are managing it who don't go outside? Something to consider. Ultimately, guys, I hope this is a good summary introduction specifically into those presidential candidates. These are the individuals who were able to go ahead and meet all the requirements to do the presidential debate. As you know, the most likely person or top runner would be Donald Trump. He will have a little bit of a tough time in the near future with what's going on. Now, considering all of this, we're going to be going into each one of these individuals and doing a full bio on who they are, where they stand, and how they voted before. We're going to be doing the same thing for Democrats as well and going through with specificity. I hope you guys are doing well. This is the only video for tonight. It is now 2:19 a.m. and I have to wake up early and get to work at the firm. I will catch you guys a little bit later. Please remember to like, subscribe, and leave a review. Disability Resolution Florida or Disability Resolution Law Firm on Google. And then basically for those individuals who always copy my material, you do not have the right to copy my voice or likeness for your future videos. I'm going to be cutting that off and sending legal notices to those groups with a cease and desist letter because it's getting out of control. I will catch you guys a little bit later. You have a wonderful night, and we will go from there. And please remember to like, and we will continue to make great content for you. Thank you so much. Have fun, guys. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.